Today is the 1st of October. For many of us on Booktube, it's a time to present our October TBR, the books we want to read during the month of October. My name is Jim. This is my channel, Books, Reading and Stuff. In September, I had 10 books on my TBR, of which I read 5. I also read 4 short stories and 2 books which weren't on my TBR because I don't stick rigidly to the plan. October is synonymous on Booktube with Victober, a celebration of Victorian literature through the month of October. Victober was the first Booktube event I participated in when I started my channel back in 2020. For Victober, to participate, all you need to do is read one book of Victorian literature. I've got one book of Victorian literature on my TBR, which is this one, Martin Chuzzlewit. Martin Chuzzlewit by Charles Dickens. I've read 11 of Dickens' novels, so this, if I read it, will be the 12th. And Dickens wrote 14 novels, so after this there'll just be 2 more. I have this very long project to read all of Dickens' novels. Martin Chuzzlewit is something of a weighty tome. This is 802 pages. There are 54 chapters, so I think if I want to read this in October, I should aim for 2 chapters a day throughout the month of October. It's the same size as Anna Karenina, which was the last book I read, which was over 800 pages long. It's interesting in that half the book takes place in America, which is unusual for Dickens. Most of Dickens' books take place in London, or at least in England. Tale of Two Cities was half in England, half in France, but this is the only Dickens novel taking place in America, and I'll be interested to see what a Victorian makes of America. The hosts of Victober, there are 5 hosts. They are Kate Howe, Katie Lumsden at Books and Things, Marissa at Blatantly Bookish, Petra at Books with Petra, and Roz at Scallywandling About the Books. And each of them has a prompt for Victober if you want to read further into Victober than just one book of Victorian literature. Kate Howe's prompt is read a Victorian work with a stranger or an outsider. I don't know if Martin Chuzzlewit will qualify for that. I'll find out when I read it. The logical one for that would be Return of the Native by Thomas Hardy, which I read a couple of years ago, where the outsider is the native actually returning to his roots. And there's other outsiders in here like Diggory Van der Edelman. Katie Lumsden's prompt is read a piece of Victorian New Woman fiction. My first contact with Booktube was doing a read-along of Odd Women by George Gissing, which was led by Katie Lumsden, which is part of the New Women fiction. It was a prototype or proto-feminist novel in the late Victorian times. It was an interesting read. Marissa's prompt, read a Victorian work by a new-to-you author. And the second book on my TBR, Killing at the Carnival by L.A. Nisula. This isn't Victorian literature, but it's set in Victorian times. It's a recent novella, and it's set in a carnival in London. It's a cosy mystery with a steampunk element into it, and it's set in Victorian times. So that looks interesting. Petra's prompt from Books with Petra is read a Victorian first-person narrative. Martin Chuzzlewit's not first person. For that you need David Copperfield or maybe Great Expectations. Sherlock Holmes, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, these are narrated in the first person by Dr. Watson, so I could use one of these. I read 3 of these stories last month, so I can read some more. Roz's prompt, Roz from Scallydandling about the books, is read a Victorian work where class plays strongly. And I imagine with Dickens, class will play strongly in Martin Chuzzlewit. And in a lot of Victorian novels, it plays a big part in Elizabeth Gaskell as well. There'll be a big part played by class. I'll put links to all the Victober announcement videos in the show notes. So you can, if you're interested in Victober, you can go to their channels, find out more about it. They also have a Discord server to discuss Victober. The other books on my TBR are not connected to Victober. The FOMO book club pick for September and October is The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield, which I think's got more of a sort of October Halloweeny vibe. It's a tale of gothic strangeness. I don't know much else about it, but I did read Once Upon a River by Diane Setterfield last year, and it was my favourite book that I read last year, so I'm looking forward to The 13th Tale. Last month was Straya September, where we read works by Australian writers. I chose this one, The Chemistry of Tears by Peter Carey. I'm halfway through it now. I want to finish that. It's actually not about Australia at all. Peter Carey was born in Australia. This, The True History of the Kelly Gang, also by Peter Carey, would be a better choice for Straya September, but I read this. This won the Booker Prize in 2001. And the Kelly Gang, famous bushrangers in Australia. Peter Carey is about this middle-aged woman who works for a museum, and her lover dies and she's grieving for that, and she's given this project to put together this automaton from Victorian times, and she reads about the creator of the automaton, Henry, who makes a trip to Germany to get the watchmakers there to create this automaton. That's nothing to do with Australia at all, apart from the writer Peter Carey is from Australia. Then there's Jade City, which was also on my September TBR, but I didn't get to it. Jade City is a fantasy by Fonda Lee, who's Canadian, and it's an Asian style fantasy, which I've heard a lot of booktubers rave about, and I want to find out what the hype is about. Then I have The Wife Upstairs by Frida McFadden. This is a psychological thriller. I'm told it's quite like Verity by Colleen Hoover, who I haven't read, but if I was to read a Colleen Hoover book, Verity would be the one I chose. I read Frida McFadden before I read The Housemaid, and I read The Co-worker, both of which were very good. They're very much page-turners and with lots of twists, which I liked. And then I've got a book, The Mongol's Coffin, which I don't know much about. It's about finding the coffin of Genghis Khan. I read the biography of Genghis Khan earlier in the year. It's not known where he was buried, and the people who buried him were killed so that the secret would stay there, and it could be interesting to read The Mongol's Coffin. There's just 7 books on the TBR. I'm sure I'll read some more. I'd be interested in fulfilling all the prompts of Victober. Martin Chuzzlewit will be quite a mammoth to get through, but the others are not so daunting. Let me know what you're reading in October in the comments below, and I will see you on the next video. Goodbye.